Hello everybody. It's a little later in the day. I didn't have to get up ahead of everybody. Everybody's gone off to do something today, but I'm not part of it, so I don't have to worry about it. All right. I gotta get this just a little bit better. There we go. We're, let's see, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're what, 2 days into Sukkot? It's a 7-day feast with an added 8th day. We're going to talk about that in a bit. We're going to talk about why the Jews celebrate it. We don't have to celebrate it from the point of view of doing the rituals. It's not a requirement for Christians. It's just fun to learn about what the people did. When we read the Bible, pretty much all the feasts remind them of their past and their future. Everything in this universe points to Jesus. That's why it was a disappointment to Jesus when he was here that they couldn't figure out who he was. Well, they're not going to make that same mistake twice. They're going to follow the fake Jesus. I've got another, if I can hang on to it, nut falling off a tree. This one's cracked. Little nut inside. I don't wish to eat it because it's been on the ground. And we have animals, so. In any case, you can tell the weather's changing. Slowly, but it's changing. I mean, I'm not seeing any leaves change. I still, again, have fallen leaves. But even we lose things. Our hair falls out. We lose some of our skin sometimes. Pretty much every cell in our body dies and is regenerated and replaced with a new one. Evolution. You pick the harder thing to do. It's far more easier to believe in a God creating all of us. Okay, well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, we are going to get back to Sukkot in a bit. All the watchers, all the teachers, they're focusing on end times and the rapture. You know, they're jumping on the bandwagon. It's a popular topic. If you watch, I like to watch, and even if I don't agree with the overall direction, I watch because I'm not going to close my mind like so many Christians have done. Learn what somebody's teaching. If you don't agree with it, just mark it down as I don't agree with it. They're trying. Everybody's trying. Don't get drawn in and start believing it if you find that it's wrong. If you can't in your mind console yourself that it is right, then don't follow it. We are going to have different opinions. We've got a lot of problems in trying to figure out calendar events. Which calendar do we use? Do we use the Hebrew calendar, the Gregorian calendar? There's a couple others we can use. They may be close. They may be, a couple of the calendars are 30 days apart. That's basically one Hebrew increment. They do things in 30-day increments. 360 days a year, not 65. Because we're on a solar calendar. And if you get right down to it, the Earth is not spinning in a circle around the sun. Ask any astronomer. The sun is going, and we're going, so we're never totally orbiting it directly. We're following it, and so is the rest of our solar system, and the universe is moving around. So it'd be very difficult. We've watched these old sci-fi movies and series, and you know I love those, like Lost in Space. How would you ever get back? Trillions and trillions of stars. You'd have to find your galaxy. Let's say you were sent all the way the other side of the universe, magically, wormhole, whatever. How would you get back? How would you map it? First off, you'd have to find your solar system and your galaxy. We have to find your galaxy first. There's a lot of spiral galaxies. So you'd have to find it. It's amongst the trillions that are out there. If you look into space, many of what you're seeing are not stars. They're galaxies. And when you look at our closest one, Andromeda, was it 2 million light years away? Or is it 2 light years? I forget now. I can't remember things like that. It's not important. The bottom line is, we're looking back, whether it's 2 million or 2 light years. We're not looking at the present. If you look at your sun right now in the sky, it is not exactly where you're seeing it. You're seeing about 7 or 8 minutes ago. That's a concept that's hard to imagine, because light travels at a fixed speed in this universe. Okay, so we have all these people trying to calculate. We have Brenda Weltner. She's got some good teachings. She's put a lot of time into her research. I don't know that I come to the conclusions that she does. I don't say that she's wrong, but I can't say that she's right. Some liberties have to be taken. Interpretation. She could be right. It doesn't matter from the point of view that we all are in agreement that there is a rapture. Now, we have those that are not, that don't believe in the rapture at all. Never happens, never will. God never used a rapture ever, and it's not even mentioned in the Bible. Well, they're showing their complete and utter ignorance, because the word harpazo is used a number of times in the Bible, and it's translated in Latin into rapturo, which we get the word rapture from. So it is there. Just the word rapture is not in the English version or the Spanish or any whatever word you want, whatever language you want to be in, except for Latin. And you say, well, we can't use Latin words. We do all the time. Is God omnipresent? Yes. And omni is Latin. Millennium, Latin. So we have a lot of Latin words. Our English is a composite of all kinds of languages. We became a melting pot not only for people but for languages. Okay, so she predicts that we're already halfway through the 70th week, that it happened when Jesus was here. Got some good arguments. Again, I tell people all the time, if we've got the gospel right, we can be wrong on prophecy. I don't know of too many prophets out there, and she's been wrong predicting the date, so she's not a prophet. Prophetess, how you say that? In any case, she's got us down that it's got to be the end of October at the latest. And she's got some good arguments. If you look beyond the big picture and start narrowing down, she's more accurate. We're in the Feast of Tabernacles. All these different words, all these different languages. Sukkot would be the best use. That's the Hebrew word. It basically means booth, not John Wilkes Booth. But it just means a little makeshift building, something you would throw together if you were camping and wanted to use primitive materials. Now, frankly, they were in the desert, so I'm not sure how they put these makeshift contraptions together, but because there was a lot of people. Their estimation of those that left Egypt were close to 1 million men. How many women and children? They didn't move overnight. They didn't just get up and have 1 million plus people move from point A to point B in one night, typically. It's going to be a process. They didn't go over the river in 15 minutes on dry ground. It wasn't, let's push the water back, let them cross, and then let it collapse. There had to be something long-term, because it would have taken them, and they've got carts and horses and all kinds of stuff to move. It would have taken them a long time. Okay, rabbit trail again. So, she says that October this year is it. At worst case scenario, into November, but not very far. So that's one. She's not giving us a date. We're getting a time frame, and it's not very long. Other ones like Jonathan Cahn, our Jewish Christian, who teaches from his point of view. He's thinking that this is perhaps the last tabernacles that we will experience. So it's got to be close for him too. And we're looking around. Things are getting ready to break loose. They give us a 45-day extension on our budget so that the government didn't shut down. They know, the crazy people in our government know very well that the rest of us know what's going on. They can't just pull anything they want to do. They would have a real revolution, coup, civil war, whatever, if they tried to do everything that they really want to do. So they can't. And the military would turn on them. You start killing lots and lots of people, you're not going to have support. Now, if you can create a pandemic, a chaos event, you can get more support. But if you just come right out and start doing stuff, you're not going to get it. We look at countries around the world are having a coup. The states in Africa that have had military coups and been taken over. It's interesting to note that 2 of those countries at least have a gas pipeline running through them, for which they were going to get no benefit. Somebody, probably us, blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. This one going through Africa was supposed to replace it. And now it's not in safe hands anymore. Interesting. People will go to all lengths to do what they need to do. Okay, so we have, a lot of people talking about the rapture. I'm giving it between this year and next year. I'm just allowing it to shift a year if we're wrong on the calendar. All of our dates have been adjusted. We know that Jesus wasn't born on 0. 1, because there's no 0 in the Roman alphabet or numeral system, but it's off by up to 7 years. We're thinking his ministry went from 27 AD to 30 AD. They can be wrong. So this feast that we're in, and it's a type of feast from the point of view that they're celebrating the 40 years that they were wandering in the wilderness. And when I say celebrating, God miraculously took care of them. They didn't get to see the promised land because of the witnesses that said we couldn't possibly do it. God isn't big enough. So he punished a whole generation essentially. Wouldn't let them go in. So they wandered, but they're out in the desert. It's not the best climate. It's not the best place to go find food. Can't take your... They didn't have guns back then, but can't take your spear or your sword and go out and hunt. So God fed them with manna. I don't know what it was. It tasted sweet, tasted good. It probably tasted good for 6 months, knowing how people are. And then they weren't happy with it. Now, at some point in time, they complained to Moses, and Moses complained to God, and he gave them quail. And they didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to go out and gather it, other than just go out in the field and gather it. They didn't have to go hunting for it. They didn't have to plant fields and farm them and maintain them. They just had to go out and pick it up where it fell. And you were only to gather 1 day at a time. If you tried to keep it over for the next day, it would rot. God took care of them. And they had to be prepared to get up and move. You have the two pillars, the fire and the cloud that were there over them, representing God's Spirit over the makeshift tabernacle, the tent. They could start moving. They had to move immediately with it. I don't know. They got a 30-minute warning. I don't know how that worked. The bottom line is they all had to pack up and move, so they couldn't build structures unless they were going to carry it with them. And that's a big desert. You'd have to carry it for miles, potentially. So they stay in a place until they overuse it. I assume they built some form of privy out there for the over 1 million people. Maybe that was the problem. They left too much discarded material behind and had to move. I don't know. The bottom line is God knew what was best, and he moved them around, so they had to be quick. I have a tent that I camp in, and it takes me about 30 minutes to an hour to close up my camp, load it in the car. Now, they didn't have cars. They had to put it in backpacks and ways that they could individually carry it, hopefully breaking it up into bags so that every member of the family carried something. So they had to pack up and move around for 40 years in order to get into the land of milk and honey. Milk and honey, by the way, just as an FYI, is the only food you can eat that you don't have to kill something for. Now, you can kill the bees, but that would be dumb. You can kill the cow, but that would be dumb. But you can milk a cow for the life of the cow. You can collect honey for the life of the hive. Anything else, you pull a carrot out of the ground, you're killing a vegetable. Or we won't eat anything we have to kill. You're killing a vegetable. So it's not you're against killing. You're just discriminatory according to the level of intelligence of what you eat. Sheep are dumb. You can eat sheep. Okay, so as I've said, Sukkot means booth in Hebrew. And you're supposed to go on this feast day, if you're homebound, go out in your backyard and build a small structure, just held together with chewing gum and Band-Aids or whatever it takes to hold it together. Hopefully you've got some twine. You know, Boy Scouts, we teach them how to lash poles together. You can make something and then just cover it. They weren't supposed to eat well because they didn't eat well in the desert. I did want to look at, I like to follow a website called Shabad.org. Shabad.org. It's a Jewish information site. And I'm going to read a little bit from their page on what Sukkot is. The festival of Sukkot commemorating God's enveloping protection of the children of Israel during their 40-year journey through the desert, 1313 to 1273 BD, or BCE, as they're using it now. BC would be before Christ, and they don't like to use Christ, so they've changed it. Is celebrated for 7 days, beginning from the eve of the 15th of Teshri. During this time, we are commanded to dwell in a Sukkot, a hut, temporary construction, with the roof covering of raw, unfinished vegetable matter, branches, reeds, bamboo, signifying a temporary and fragility of human habitation and man-made shelter, and our utter dependence on God's protection and providence. They could be attacked out there in the middle of that 40-year reign out there. They really didn't have any protection. How does one fulfill the mitzvah of dwelling in the Sukkot? One should eat, drink, and live in the Sukkot, both day and night, as one lives in one's house on the other days. There's rules on this. I'm just giving you what's here. At least one loaf of bread should be eaten in the Sukkot in the first evening of the festival. It falls on a Sabbath, so it's going to be unleavened bread. Between nightfall and midnight, remember their days start the night before. So technically, Friday night was the beginning of Tabernacles. And then it went on Saturday, and now this is Sunday as I'm doing this message. So for the rest of the festival, all meals must be eaten in the Sukkot. There's a reference here to what a meal is and what they're supposed to do. Shabbat custom is to return from eating and drinking anything outside the Sukkot, even a glass of water. It's to refrain from, not return, refrain from. This is to remind them of what God did for them. As with all the festivals, they all point backwards and forward to remind people to think about God. They added the 8th day as a day of reflection for all this. So that's kind of what this ritual is about. We're supposed to read verses out of the Bible. All the festivals typically have them start in Leviticus. That defines what their particular festival is. I just got a couple of verses here that I wanted to read out of Leviticus 22:26. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, when a bullock or a sheep or a goat is brought forth, then it shall be 7 days under the dam outside. And from the 8th day and thenceforth it shall be accepted as an offering and made by fire unto the Lord. So there's an 8th day ceremony. Tabernacles is a 7 with an 8th day. This is something that happens a lot. And not something that's only going on for just the length of the festival. It's a rite of purification. So let's take a look at some other 8-day events. If you're a leper and you've been cleansed, you have to remain outside for 8 days. You can't join her. Just because you were cleansed on day 1, you can't go in. Jesus healed some lepers. He still had to follow the rules, the laws. Priests. All priests have to be purified. Aaron and his family weren't naturally holy. 2 of his sons died trying to do something, not following the rules. They thought they were special, and they did something outside the rules of God in dealing with their priestly duties, and they died. Of course, it's immediate after that. Family meeting. If I give you a rule, follow it. Or this is an example. Even the good intentions don't make up for not doing what God wants to do. The guy that tried to stop the Ark of the Covenant from falling off the cart died. Not supposed to touch that thing. That's why the poles are there. Insulated poles. This thing might be some massive capacitor. I don't know. If you touch a body, you're not clean for 8 days. And if we look back in Genesis, technically, God created the universe in 6 days, rested on the 7th, and then man began doing his duties on the 8th. So, this is a pattern. God likes to work in patterns. That's why everybody keeps saying, well, it's got to line up with this feast because it's a pattern. The rapture is a unique event. You're not going to find a pattern. You can twist and turn and push things together and make them fit. But that's not what God does. They ought to just slide in together without any force. Okay, so we're still looking at 2023. Are we really going to see a rapture? It's imminent. It's always been imminent. You either believe there's a rapture or you pick one of the 3 and claim that that's the only one. I get this all the time. I'm going to start leaving some of the things that I don't agree with in the comments. I want you to see what people comment on. If I'm leaving it, it doesn't mean I approve it. If it goes against what I teach, I'm not approving it. I'm just leaving it so you can see what we have to deal with when we go out in the world. Now, I get far worse, and the bad stuff won't stay. I've got filters anyway for bad words. And I get a lot of those. They go into a hold for me, and you don't see it, but I get to see it. And just general yelling and screaming and venting. I get a lot of that. You hypocrite. And then they go into name calling. They don't stay. But that's what we have to deal with. They've been taught to close their mind. Yes, there is a narrow way. And God will provide all that you need to get to that narrow path. There's an infinite number of ways to get to that narrow path. So don't just say that you got to start right here and you can't take your eyes off of anything and you got to walk straight forward. You don't know where the narrow path is, necessarily. I'm being figurative here. We know it's through Jesus, so don't go telling me that I'm telling people that we don't know about the narrow path. I'm being figurative here. Leave your mind open to hear things and then discard what doesn't fit. But how are you going to know if you've got it perfectly right if you don't compare? Compare shopping. I found a shirt that had pink polka dots, I'm not going to wear it. I might look at it, see how well it's made, but I'm not going to buy it. Don't close your mind off, because you're liable to miss something from God. The gospel is true, it's right, it's the only way. You can't work your way to heaven. But once you're a Christian, you will be doing works. Leave your mind open on what those works can be. Because you don't know what God's going to have you do. You don't know what your gift is necessarily. Those of us that have been doing this for a long time know what our gifts are. I know what I'm best at. I can do something else. If something comes up, God can assign it to me and I can do it with His help. Don't leave me and say, here, go do brain surgery on that. I don't know how to do that. God does. And a lot of times, too, we act like kids. I don't want to do that. We throw a temper tantrum. If you got a kid that won't pick up his toys, you sit down on the floor with them, and you pick toys up and you throw them in the basket. You reach over, grab their hand, grab a toy in their hand, and pick it up and put it in the basket. Make them do it. He has to treat us the same way. We're like kids to Him, no matter how smart you are. Okay, so my job has been what it always has been, and it's really what everybody has. Mine's more of a specific calling to get out and voice my opinion here in public and let people know. It's similar to John the Baptist. I am not the attraction. He is not the attraction. He says he wasn't worthy to untie the laces of Jesus. Now, I'm not worthy to untie John's laces. But I'm here. We need to get people to wake up, realize that they're running out of time very fast. As much as we're looking forward to the rapture, we have to be looking backward to see who we're going to grab a hold and carry with us. It's not our job to save people, but it's our job to tell people, to be a witness. Now, John the Baptist went out with a standard order issued. Matthew 3:1. In those days, John the Baptist came preaching in the wilderness of Judea, Matthew 3:2, and saying, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That's all my message really is. Now, I couldn't talk on that infinitely, not as much as I have, so I've had to mix it up, add other things, topics in there. We've talked about compassion, we've talked about love, we've talked about all kinds of other things that are from the Bible. These are Bible studies. I've taught the Bible for years. I'm not a preacher, per se. The only reason I can do this is I do acting. That gives me the courage to get up in front of people. If you take an acting class, you're taught to do the most absurd, stupid things to get rid of your inhibitions so that you can laugh and cry and yell and do whatever you have to do. Whatever the emotion of the scene calls for, you have to display it. Even talking heads on the news, even though they're reading, they have to use their voice. The inflections go up and down. Now, I'm kind of a monotone talker. I don't really put a lot into it. But that's just my personality. I'm Mr. Rogers of the Bible world. I don't know. I'm giving honesty as best I can, truth as best I can, using the Spirit to guide me. Now, we can misunderstand the Spirit. There's a Charlie Chan episode where the kid's got a speeding ticket, not a speeding ticket, but a driving ticket for making a U-turn. And then in the scene, the way it's written, it's, well, I came up to an intersection, and I said, do I turn here? And somebody said, no, you turn here. Well, how do you inflex that? No, you're turn here. You can't make a U-turn here. Or, no, U-turn here. You see, just a simple sentence can be misunderstood. So he made the U-turn and got a ticket. We do this all the time with God, and he understands, because we don't see face to face, as we're told. We see through a milky glass, which means we can see silhouettes, but we can't always get definition. We will. We're going to be with him shortly with a new body, a sin-free body, and it's not our body that sins, it's our mind. Jesus said, if you think it in your mind, you've done it. So for those of us that say, you know, I try not to sin, but I do, we don't have to physically sin. We just have to think about it. A nice new car drives by. That's a nice new car. Are you coveting it? Perhaps. A nice looking person driving it. Are you coveting the person and the car? Thinking about ways to get to the person to get to the car? You see, our minds just want to wander into sin because it's our nature. You got to be careful what you think about. We have our Bible. If you think about it all the time, there's not a whole lot of room to put anything else in there. But that's boring. That's what the people of Israel had as a problem, wandering the desert. What did they do for 40 years in a desert? Eat one food, maybe two, for 40 years. They didn't have phones like I've got now. You couldn't be on their phone all day long. There's no phones. And if you go back in time and take your phone with you, there'd be no one to talk to. You were by yourself. They had some games, very simple games. Little top and some sticks, pickup sticks, things like that. Simple games. They didn't even have Monopoly. Where do we put, do we cross zero? Where do I put Solomon's temple? They didn't have games like that. That's why David got so good at throwing a stone. Lots of time to practice. Okay, so we're in the biggest holiday now. There are 3 feasts that require pilgrimage, and this is one of them. You have to travel to Jerusalem from wherever you're at and do your sacrifice at the temple. There's no temple. So this is the last one, theoretically, that's going to be done like this, according to Jonathan Cahn. I think, and I kind of agree with him, I think the next tabernacles will have a sacrifice with either a real temple or a makeshift. Remember the tent, they can have that. Now what are we going to do with the Dome of the Rock? I personally think that God will destroy it. We have a war coming. Magog war. Maybe it gets destroyed in that. It's possible. Could be an earthquake. An earthquake has destroyed it once before. I think 3 times. But it's been rebuilt. The gold dome was put on, I think, in the 1930s. Saudi Arabia paid for it. It didn't always look like that. It wasn't pretty like that. The tiles have been added. You know, if you look inside, there are 12 pillars, 12 tribes. It was a memorial to where the temple was. And then they decided to turn it political and say that, their lies are just, they're coming straight from Satan. Israel never owned the land. They never occupied the land. It's always been Palestinian. That is an outright lie. And the countries around them know it. Iran's the primary country with these lies, and they're working for the devil, the elites are. Don't condemn the people in a country because their leaders are serving the devil. We're getting a lot of Christians born every day in Iran and surrounding countries, because they can see what's going on and they know that these are lies. They've got their history that they've been taught. Okay. Keep holding on, but keep busy. The hardest thing you can do when you know something's coming up is just to sit and wait for it. It will take forever. Keep busy and you'll be looking up and going, oh, it's time to go home now. You've ever been at work and you're bored? Find something to do. The day will go faster. And we have work as Christians to do. Help people. Pray for people. And take God's love to anybody you see, wherever they are. Even if you don't like them, show them God's love. It may melt the iceberg you're looking at, and you might find a new friend. God's love can do that. Okay, I'm way over on this. I'm sorry, but it's just, there's so much to talk about. We're going to be meeting shortly in the clouds. God bless.